Hello, and welcome to the Just Bible No Fluff podcast. My name is Katie, and here it's all about the unfiltered Bible without any extras. Join me for a focused journey through faith, uncovering the truths that truly matter. In today's episode, we will be uncovering a biblical truth from John chapter 15, verse 18, through John chapter 16, verse 4. So grab your Bibles and let's dive in. The text reads, "If the world hates you, know that it has hated me before it hated you. If you were of the world would love you as its own. But because you are not of the world, but I chose you out of the world, therefore the world hates you. Remember the word that I said to you, a servant is not greater than his master. If they persecuted me, they will also persecute you. If they kept my word, they will also keep yours. But all these things they will do to you on account of my name, because they do not know him who sent me. If I had not come and spoken to them, they would not have been guilty of sin. But now they have no excuse for their sin. Whoever hates me hates my Father also. If I had not done among them the works that no one else did, they would not be guilty of sin. But now they have seen and hated both me and my Father. But the word that it is written by their law must be fulfilled. They hated me without a cause. But when the Helper comes, whom I sent to you from the Father, the Spirit of truth, who proceeds from the Father, he will bear witness about me. And you also will bear witness, because you have been with me from the beginning. I have said all these things to you to keep you from falling away. They will put you out of the synagogues. Indeed, your hour is coming when whoever kills you will think he is offering service to God. And they will do these things because they have not known the Father nor me. But I have said these things to you, that when their hour comes, you may remember that I told them to you." Okay, so now let's zoom out. So the book of John was written by John, one of Jesus's closest disciples. So he wrote this book to prove that Jesus is the Christ. And we see a lot of I am statements because of that, because he's saying who Jesus is. So in John chapter 20, verse 31, John tells us that his main purpose of this is to bring us life in heaven. In the section we're in right now, John is telling us that following Jesus clashes with the world. His teachings clash with the world. Jesus clashed with the world. So we will clash with the world. So with that in mind, let's hop into the text. So in verse 18, it starts off, "If the world hates you, know that it has hated me before it hated you." So Jesus is saying, the world hated me, and you're following me. So the world is going to hate you because it hated me first. In verse 19, he says, "If you were of the world would love you as its own." So if we're not replicating the Jesus lifestyle, we're replicating the world lifestyle. And he's saying here, John is saying that if we're replicating the Jesus lifestyle, we are going to be hated. But if we are replicating the world lifestyle, the world is going to love us because we're part of it. We're blending in. We're becoming the world. So they will love us. Following the Jesus lifestyle will make us stand out, and that will cause us to be hated. So the verse continues and says, "Because you are not of the world." So see, We're not of it. We're separate. We're not blending in. And it says, but I chose you out of the world. So when we follow Jesus, he chooses us. And the verse continues and says, therefore the world hates you. So if we're choosing God, they will hate us. So then in verse 20 it says, remember the word I said to you. So John is saying something he's already told us. And it says, a servant is not greater than his master. So Jesus is the master. Now, if the master is treated a certain way, the servants will be treated that way also. The servants don't get treated better if they're following the master. They'll get treated the same as the master. So what is our master doing? Our master is Jesus if we're choosing him. So we have a master. Will we let Jesus be that master, or will we let the world be our master? He's saying there's two things. If you're choosing Jesus, you will be hated. And if you're choosing the world as your master, you will be loved. And it continues and says, if they persecuted me, they will also persecute you. So which master are we choosing? And then it says, if they kept my word, they will also keep yours. So in the world, the people who are following Jesus and choosing him as their master, they will also keep your word. So they won't have a problem with the things you tell them because they're also trying to do those things. They're also trying to choose Jesus and not the world. But if your words offend people, then they might not be choosing Jesus as their master. And then it continues and says, let's continue in verse 20. It says, so we just read, if they kept my word, they will keep yours also. And then it picks up in 21 and says, but all these things they will do to you on account of my name. So everything is because of Jesus. Because they do not know him who sent me. So they're doing the things because of Jesus, because they don't know God. So verse 22 says, if I had not come and spoken to them, they would not have been guilty of sin. So Jesus came and told the people what they needed to do to follow him and the things they needed to stop to follow him, which meant the people had to choose. They had to choose to do those things every day. They had to choose to let go of certain things every day. And if they're not making those choices every single day, not just on Sundays when we're at church, or Wednesdays if we come to evening service, but during the weekdays, if we're not choosing those choices that God has told us during the week, then we might start feeling guilty. And that verse continues and says, but now they have no excuse for their sin. So we don't have an excuse for our sin anymore because God told us the things we should be doing and the things we should not be doing. And then in verse 23, he goes on and says, whoever hates me, hates my Father also. If I had not done among them the works that no one else did, they would not be guilty of sin. So he's saying if he had not come and set certain parameters that we have to meet, then they wouldn't have they wouldn't have an issue with anything and they wouldn't be feeling guilty. But now that there are parameters that we have to follow in order to follow Jesus, that causes guilt. And the verse continues in verse 24 and says, but now they have seen and hated both me and my Father. And then verse 25 says, but the word that is written in their law must be fulfilled. They hated me without a cause. So if anyone had no reason to be hated, it was Jesus. He did not sin, and yet they hated him. So verse 26 says, but when the Helper comes, whom I sent to you by the Father, the Spirit of truth, who proceeds from the Father, he will bear witness about me. And you also will bear witness, because you have been with me from the beginning. So the people who will bear witness are the disciples. They've been with Jesus, and they've seen everything from the very beginning. And then we're going to start at the beginning of chapter 16, because this continues the context. And it says, I have said all these things to you to keep you from falling away. Now remember, the idea of the book of John, he tells us at the end of the book of John that his purpose of this book is to make sure we have life in heaven. So he's saying, by choosing the world which loves us when we choose it, we won't have life. We're going to fall away. 16 verse 1 says, if you to keep you from falling away, he's saying, if you are hated by the world because you're making the Jesus choices of life, you won't fall away. But if you're blending in with the world and picking the world one too many times, you will be loved by the world, but you will be falling away from God. So verse 2 in chapter 16 starts and says, they will put you out of the synagogues. So the synagogues, these are the believers of the Bible times that should have seen Jesus. They should have known who he was, but they didn't. So in this time, the disciples were getting kicked out of the synagogues, the places they should have been accepted, but they weren't accepted. Why? Because the leaders of the time were not choosing the Jesus way. So the verse continues and says, indeed, the hour is coming when whoever kills you will think he is offering service to God. And they will do these things because they have not known the Father nor me. But I have said these things to you, that when their hour comes, you may remember that I told them to you. So sometimes the people that should make the better choices don't make the better choices. Sometimes they think they're doing the right thing, but they're not. Like the Jewish leaders, they should have seen he was coming, but they persecuted the Christians. So we will get persecution, and sometimes the persecution may come from people that should know the right choices. So in the context today, the book of John shows us that our main purpose in life is to get to heaven. And at the end of the day, we have two choices to make. Are we going to blend in with the world so we don't get persecution, which ultimately means we're choosing the world because they're going to start loving us? Or are we going to stand out and choose God and choose the Jesus choices which will lead to the world hating us? Because the world will never love Jesus. So today, as you go about your day, think about every decision and every action that you make today and ask yourself, are you blending in the world, or are you going to stand out and be hated? Will you blend in today, or will you be hated? That's what John is saying. He says if you're blending in, you're choosing death. But if you're standing out, you will receive hate. So if you are receiving hate today, it might be because you are making a better choice in life. So, will you blend in, or will you be hated? Thank you for joining me on this episode of the Just Bible No Fluff podcast. New episodes every Monday. Remember, the beauty of the Bible lies in its direct impact on our lives. Stay connected, stay faithful, and keep diving into the unfiltered wisdom of God's Word. Until next time, this is Katie signing off, wishing you a day filled with purpose and faith.